There's a pattern in American history that almost nobody talks about, and the reason nobody talks about it is because it's uncomfortable. It forces you to look at the most powerful nation on earth and ask a question that sounds almost impossible. What if America keeps making the same catastrophic mistake over and over again? And what if right now, in 2026, we are watching it happen for the third time? This isn't a conspiracy theory. This isn't partisan politics. This is history. Cold, documented, undeniable history. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But here's what makes this video different from every other doom and gloom analysis you've seen. We're not just going to talk about the trap. We're going to talk about the escape hatch. Because for the first time in 50 years, America actually has one. The question is whether it will use it in time, or whether the very thing that could save it will end up accelerating its collapse instead. Let's start at the beginning. After World War II, the world was in ruins. Europe was destroyed, Japan was destroyed, and into that vacuum stepped the United States of America. Fresh, powerful, holding more than half of the world's gold reserves, producing nearly 40% of the entire planet's economic output. America didn't just win the war. America became the world. In 1944, representatives from 44 allied nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They agreed that the US dollar would become the world's reserve currency, backed by gold at $35 per ounce. America became the banker of the world, and for a while it worked beautifully. But here's where the first trap begins. When you become the world's banker, you face a paradox, a very dangerous paradox. In order for the global economy to grow, other countries need dollars. But the only way for dollars to flow out into the world is for America to spend more than it earns, to run deficits, to export its currency by importing more than it exports, by spending money abroad on military bases, foreign aid, and wars. An economist named Robert Triffin identified this problem in 1960 and brought it to Congress. He said that if America runs deficits to supply the world with dollars, eventually the world will hold more dollars than America holds in gold. Confidence in the dollar collapses. But if America stops running deficits to protect its gold reserves, the global economy starves for liquidity and collapses anyway. There is no clean way out. This became known as the Triffin Dilemma, and it was already eating America alive by the early 1960s. Then came Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson tried to fight a massive war in Southeast Asia while simultaneously building his Great Society programs at home. He refused to raise taxes, so he printed money. He ran massive deficits. Inflation rose. The dollar weakened. Foreign governments began redeeming their dollars for gold at an accelerating rate. America's gold reserves drained from $20 billion to around $10 billion by 1971. Meanwhile, foreign institutions held over $80 billion. The math was simple and terrifying. America did not have enough gold. The system was a fraud. On August 15, 1971, Nixon went on television and announced that the United States was suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The Bretton Woods system was over. The dollar was now backed by nothing except trust in the United States government. This was the first time America fell into the trap, and the consequences were severe. The 1970s were a decade of stagflation, oil shocks, and economic stagnation. It took Paul Volcker raising interest rates to nearly 20% to finally restore confidence in the dollar. But the dollar survived, because Kissinger made a deal. In 1973 and 1974, America negotiated with Saudi Arabia, price your oil exclusively in dollars, and we will protect your regime. OPEC followed, and just like that, the dollar had a new foundation. Not gold, but oil. The petrodollar system was born. America got a second lease on its exorbitant privilege, and America walked straight back into the trap. Deficits grew through the 1980s and 1990s. The national debt climbed from under $1 trillion when Reagan took office to over $5 trillion by the time Clinton left. But because the world kept absorbing dollars, the consequences were masked. America could borrow cheaply. Political will to address the imbalances never materialized. Then came the second trap. After September 11, 2001, America launched wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, costing somewhere between $3 and $8 trillion. Bush cut taxes twice, while fighting two wars simultaneously. The Federal Reserve kept interest rates artificially low for years, flooding the economy with cheap money that poured into housing. Banks issued mortgages to anyone with a pulse. In 2008, the entire global financial system nearly collapsed. The Fed responded with trillions in bailouts and quantitative easing. The national debt crossed $10 trillion and kept climbing. Then came COVID. America injected $5 to $7 trillion of new money into the economy in roughly 2 years. The national debt crossed $30 trillion. Inflation hit 9%. The Fed raised rates aggressively, and suddenly, with $36 trillion of debt, every interest rate increase became a direct fiscal catastrophe. By 2024, America was spending more on interest payments on its national debt than on its entire defense budget. Now, stop. Because this is the moment in every video like this where the narrator tells you the empire is finished, where the conclusion is inevitable decline, dollar collapse, and chaos. But that's not the full picture. And giving you half the picture would make us exactly like every other channel that profits from your fear. Because here is what is also true about America in 2026. America is experiencing a technological renaissance of a kind the world has not seen since the Industrial Revolution. And it is happening right now, at the exact same moment as the debt crisis. The interaction between these two forces is the real story nobody is telling properly. In artificial intelligence, America is not just leading, it is lapping the field. The most powerful AI systems in the world are built by American companies. The chips that run these systems are designed by American companies. The cloud platforms that host them are American. The talent, the capital, the research output, the patent filings. America dominates every single dimension of the AI economy. And AI is not just a product. It is a productivity multiplier. A faster-growing economy generates more tax revenue without higher tax rates. It makes the debt-to-GDP ratio more manageable. It could, in theory, be the engine that grows America out of its debt trap. But the word there is theory, and we will come back to that. On energy, the shale revolution transformed America from the world's largest oil importer to the world's largest oil producer within roughly a decade. For 50 years, American foreign policy was shaped and corrupted by the need to secure access to Middle Eastern oil. The petrodollar system itself was built on this dependency. That dependency is now structurally diminished. An America that produces its own energy has lower input costs, greater geopolitical freedom, and the ability to use energy as a strategic weapon rather than a strategic vulnerability. And America is leading the global transition to clean energy simultaneously. Solar, wind, battery storage, nuclear fusion research. American companies and American capital are at the frontier of all of these. The manufacturing investment boom triggered by the Inflation Reduction Act is reshaping American industrial geography in real time. So you have the most powerful AI industry in the world, the most productive energy sector in the world, the deepest capital markets in the world, the most innovative university system in the world, and a demographic advantage over every major rival. China is aging rapidly. Europe is stagnant. Japan has been stagnant for 30 years. This is the Fortress America scenario, and it is real. These are genuine structural advantages that no serious analyst dismisses. But here is where the synthesis gets brutal. The debt is not a background problem that the AI boom will quietly solve. The debt is an active compounding force that is already competing with the technology investment boom for the same finite pool of capital. And in that competition, the debt may be winning. When the US government needs to borrow trillions every year to cover its deficit, it goes to the bond market and offers interest rates that set the floor for every other rate in the economy. Mortgage rates, corporate borrowing rates, startup financing rates, everything prices off the treasury rate. When government borrowing keeps upward pressure on interest rates, it directly competes with the private sector for capital. A startup developing the next breakthrough AI application is competing, indirectly, with the US Treasury for investor dollars. This is called crowding out. At current debt levels, it is not hypothetical. It is measurable and significant. Here is the deeper irony. The investment in AI and clean energy that could theoretically rescue America from its debt trap requires massive amounts of patient, long-term capital. Training frontier AI models costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Building new semiconductor fabrication plants costs tens of billions. Constructing clean energy infrastructure to power an AI-driven economy costs hundreds of billions. All of this requires low or stable interest rates to make the long-term investment economics work. But the debt crisis is pushing interest rates higher, which makes the technology investment harder, which slows the productivity growth that was supposed to solve the debt crisis. The trap feeds itself. And then there is the AI energy paradox specifically. The same AI revolution that could increase productivity and grow America out of its debt is consuming energy at a rate that is straining the electrical grid and creating new inflationary pressure in the very sector that was supposed to be a source of strength. The largest technology companies in the world are now signing long-term contracts for nuclear power and natural gas generation because they cannot get enough clean power to run their data centers. The AI boom is literally reversing the clean energy transition in measurable ways, at least in the short term. So the technology that could save the fiscal situation is consuming the energy resources that were supposed to reduce inflationary pressure, while the debt crowds out the capital needed to build the infrastructure to power the technology. It is a circle of contradictions, and resolving it requires a level of coordinated long-term policy thinking that politically polarized democracies find almost impossible to execute. Which brings us to where we actually are. The world is not waiting for America to resolve its internal contradictions. The world is adjusting. China, Russia, India, Brazil, the BRICS nations collectively representing roughly 40% of global GDP, have been building the infrastructure for a world less dependent on the dollar. Alternative payment systems, currency swap agreements, commodity trade settled in non-dollar currencies. Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the petrodollar system Kissinger built in 1974, has signed agreements allowing oil purchases in Chinese yuan. When Saudi Arabia hedges, the architecture that kept the dollar dominant for 50 years develops structural cracks. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has declined from over 70% in the early 2000s to around 58% today. Still dominant. Still by far the largest share of any currency, but the direction is unmistakable, and the pace of decline is accelerating precisely as confidence in American fiscal management is being tested. This is the multipolar world, not a world where China replaces America. China has severe structural problems of its own. Extreme debt levels, deteriorating demographics, a fragile financial system. The yuan is not becoming the world's reserve currency anytime soon. The more likely outcome is a world where no single currency is dominant, where trade is conducted in a fragmented system of regional currencies, bilateral agreements, and perhaps eventually digital assets. In that world, the rules change fundamentally for ordinary Americans. In the dollar-dominant world, Americans have enjoyed a hidden subsidy their entire lives. Cheap imports, because the world sends real goods in exchange for dollars that cost nothing to print. Low borrowing costs, because global demand for dollar assets suppresses interest rates. The ability to run deficits indefinitely, because the rest of the world absorbs the excess dollars. In a multipolar world, these advantages erode. Higher prices for imported goods. Higher mortgage rates. A government that faces genuine choices between raising taxes, cutting spending, or inflating the debt away. This is not a prediction of catastrophe. It is a prediction of adjustment, and countries that see adjustments coming navigate them far better than countries that are surprised. So what does preparation look like? It looks like understanding that holding all your wealth in dollar-denominated assets is a concentration risk. It was not 20 years ago. Not because the dollar collapses tomorrow, but because the probability of adverse outcomes has shifted meaningfully. It looks like understanding that the AI and energy revolution is real, and that the companies driving it will generate genuine wealth regardless of what currency that wealth is denominated in. Productivity is real. Innovation is real. It looks like investing in skills that AI cannot easily replicate. Judgment, creativity, complex relationship management. The skills that become more valuable precisely as AI commoditizes routine cognitive work. Most importantly, it looks like paying attention to what your government does with the fiscal situation over the next 5 to 10 years. Because the choices made in that window, whether to use the technology boom to genuinely restructure the debt or simply use it as an excuse to delay the reckoning, will determine which of these scenarios actually materializes. America has been here before. It fell into the trap in 1971. It fell into the trap again in 2008. Each time it survived. Each time it paid a price. Each time it was saved partly by genuine strengths and partly by the absence of real alternatives. In 2026, the genuine strengths are more impressive than they have ever been, but the alternatives are more developed than they have ever been. The debt is larger than it has ever been, and the political will to make hard choices is more absent than it has ever been. The third trap is set. America is standing at its edge. Whether it falls in, or whether it uses the most powerful technological moment in a century to finally escape the cycle, is the defining question of the decade. The answer will not be written in Washington, not in Beijing, not in Riyadh. It will be written by whether enough people understand what is actually happening, by whether the citizens of the most powerful country in the history of the world decide they want to be the generation that finally solved the problem, or the generation that finally ran out of road. The choice is still open, but the window is closing, and now you know what almost nobody else does.